in poverty when they're doing research for the public good. So there's a huge amount to do. I'll keep pushing in there. Please keep raising your voices. I think one of the problems we see is the disconnect. You know, people who sit in that place are on a couple $100,000 a year. Many of them haven't paid for petrol for decades. And we have to bring the reality that young people are facing to them and force them to take this seriously. And whether that is in a minority government that says, well, actually, we're going to put young people front and center, then so be it. But I don't want to have to wait that long. So thank you for coming along and raising your voices. There's a huge amount to do. As you know, we'll be looking at the budget through the lens of young people and sort of reporting back and seeing what's in there, but importantly, what's not in there. And I have zero sympathy for a government that says we can't afford to lift people out of poverty. We can't afford to have a social security system that means that people are actually safe. One, when we have a budget surplus, but two, when we refuse to tax fossil fuel companies, our gas exports. There is revenue there for us that is Australians' resources, Australia's wealth, and we should be taxing it. So thank you for what you're doing. Keep pushing the government. I'll keep pushing in there as an independent. But there are a range of crossbenchers who have been talking about this. I see Senator Faruqi. She's a very strong voice for students. So you're not alone, but it's certainly an uphill battle with the major parties, but things will change. So thank you.
Nobody deserves poverty! End poverty! End poverty! No buses. More buses. More buses. More public transport.
Hey John, how are you? Very well. Whereabouts are you at?
I am, yeah. Sorry.
Oh yeah.
I'm residing in Jack.
You're doing it all online?
Right now I'm in person.
Oh, okay. Cool. What are you studying?
I'm doing law and international relations.
Oh, cool. Careful what you do with law. Look,
Yeah.
You've got me in all sorts of scrap.
I'm looking at coming to ANU next year for
Oh yeah.
whole sign international relations.
Well, my daughter's she's in second doing art school. And she's doing international relations. She's my cousin. She's kind of And you're going to wrap up.
I think so. But I did legal studies as well. I don't really like law. It's something, yeah.
Yeah, litigation is even drama. I did torts, discrimination.
Yeah, I find the admin and
A lot of it is in law.
nice meeting you. See you.
Alrighty, we ready to roll? Have you caucused? Is this? I thought this is what you wanted. Okay, sure. Yeah.
I need to run.
Well, budgets are all about choice. The Commonwealth government chooses where to put that. We've already seen in hundreds of we start with
The Greens don't believe that minor changes.
Oh, okay. While I'm thinking, hang on.
No, sorry. When I was saying, and then we got to go on Jamie.
Okay. Andrew, we gotta head. Andrew and Chris, we gotta head.
those who've just graduated.
Well, I can figure this out.
We might give you a
Are you taking it over you, Chris? How you'll join up there? Alright, left. Wait, my left.
Damn straight. Hey guys. Bill and Paul should be up soon to start our little rally.
How's the artists going?
What do you think?
Misinformation killed. You're right, it did. Looks like they're done, eh?
Yeah, they are.
Want to start, Matt? You first?
Me first.
You've got
I
that
wasn't
facing
prepared
me
for
now,
that. I was
haven't you?
prepared. That was.
That's facing me now, isn't it?
Huh?
The camera.
Yeah.
Oh well. I'm gonna upset somebody.
What are you doing? Who goes this lady? No one, nothing. No, no. Oh my God. Well done.
Oh, so Phil then, this is the third.
I haven't had one today either. I haven't had one today either. Thanks, Lulu.
You can go extra mad on me because I started up again this year after 10-year break. Oh, I thought it was just an elbow still going.
Stepped a bit close. Thanks, guys, for coming. We also were going to have a protest at 12 o'clock, but you guys, we wanted to let you guys go first. We didn't want to interrupt you. Thank you for standing strong. The cost of living is going through the roof. I can't understand how they're going to let you guys I don't know how you're going to afford houses and all that sort of stuff. Hats off for you for standing for your rights and your truth. Thank you very much. And yeah, thank you very much. It's good to see young people standing up for their rights.
Oh, hello, Django. Django.
So today in Parliament, there was the misinformation, disinformation bill, as well as the budget. Very, very interesting to have both of them together. I think that'll be so that mainstream media, who are rushing off now, because we're not talking about the stuff they want us to talk about, I think you'll find that mainstream media will only talk about the fact that the budget was on today. There's another interesting fact today, that David McBride was sent to jail. David McBride is a whistleblower who brought to the attention that there was possibly war crimes committed in Afghanistan, where people, innocent people, were killed. And when this was brought to the attention of the brass, they started investigating other people other than the people that were brought to the attention, because they didn't want them to know. They didn't want them to investigate into certain crimes. So David McBride didn't even release documents, and in his trial, the Crown prosecutors took off the table the documents that he was going to bring forward for his innocence, and then they brought their own specialist witness in. And when they asked him if the documents he brought to the table were sensitive, he said no. So they removed that evidence. They withdrew that evidence. How can you do that in a trial? The Crown prosecutors first took away his ability to defend himself by saying he couldn't bring certain documents to the table, and then when their own star witness didn't agree with them, they withdrew that evidence too. And they originally told him that they weren't going to go for a custodial sentence. They were probably just going to do house arrest. And then today, on his first charge, they gave him 32 months incarceration. On his second charge, they gave him 32 months of incarceration. And on his third charge of stealing, he never actually took anything physical. It was purely digital information. They gave him 27 months. And then they said they were going to lock him up in a penitentiary for a minimum of 27 months, even though they said they weren't. So they lied at the start of the trial. Then, not only did they lie, they didn't let him serve them consecutively like they said they would. So now a man who brought forward possible criminal actions ended up in jail, and none of the people that possibly committed crimes ended up even getting investigated. In fact, one of them actually got a medal. How is this possible? So what we're saying here is anybody who brings forth a crime is possibly a criminal and will be incarcerated. But the criminal will not be incarcerated. And there's some famous quote that says that the government can only control criminals, and they will continue to make laws until good men and women become criminals. And that is what happened today. A good man who stood up for the Australian people and Afghani's people got a criminal sentence and a criminal charge. How is that even a thing? The only criminals that I can see in the whole thing was the Crown, the Attorney General, who could have stepped in and withdrew the charges, the Governor General and Albanese, who could have stepped in and given him a pardon after the charges, the sentencing. The magistrate, well, faced with what he was told, he maybe only got part of the story. I can give him a little bit of slack, but I'm disappointed in him. The Crown prosecutor, she didn't even turn up today for her sentencing. How rude is that? Maybe she couldn't sleep, or maybe she died suddenly. There seems to be a bit of that going on lately. This is not okay. Albanese, it's time to step in or step out.
Step in and remove David McBride's guilty plea, give him a pardon, or step out, because you're definitely not working for the Australian people. We've seen that multiple times. I noticed you didn't come down to this protest today. Why was that? Because the last time you came down to protest, you stuck a foot in your mouth. The second time you talked about it, you stuck the other one in your mouth. You're not a very clever man, Albanese. The Australian people can see it a mile away. Possibly, no, I'd say definitely the worst Prime Minister we've ever had.
And just because there's not many of us here, Australian people know.
The Australian people had it with the Australian government. We are disappointed with the Australian government. We know the Australian government are only there to feather their nest. Serve a time in there, and then get a big cushy job somewhere. Spend the people's money on ridiculous, stupid things. Not on the roads, not on the hospitals, not on their own people. Give it to different countries so that they can murder other people. That's right, we fund murder. Australians fund murder every day. Billions of dollars worth. We even gave them weapons so they could murder people from our own armories. Drones. Military vehicles. That's right. And those drones were used to murder people. Albanese is liable for murder charges for okaying the fact that they're going to give drones for war. What are we even doing funding a war on that side of the world? Literally has nothing to do with us. We've never been attacked on our own soil in the last 100 years. Not quite. 90 years. 45. It's time the Australian government stood for the Australian people. It's time Albanese got the boot. It's time for the Governor-General to issue a writ for a fresh election, not a selection. The worst Prime Minister in Australia's history needs to go. Open and transparent, my foot. When Albanese lied at the last protest, his second time he came out to talk about it, he goes, oh, but you know, women's hormones. Are you serious, Albanese? Are you brain dead? I think so. You definitely don't deserve the role you've got. The Governor-General, you don't deserve that role. Move on. And the woke person they're going to put in there next, her website is so proud of the fact that she has got every job she's got pulling the woke card. Why? Can she not earn her own merits? There's plenty of Australians who can do that job properly. Misinformation bill. I seem to remember in March 2021, someone said safe and effective. And yet, in March 2021, there was a Pfizer document that came out with 3 pages of side effects. Shingles, myocarditis, blood clots, brain fog, death was even on there. Interesting side effect. I would call that a causality, not a side effect. Loss of limbs. The list just went on. 3 pages full. Not 3 lines, not 3 pages of lines, multiple ones per line. And that was in March 2021 that document came out. And then in March 2022, the EU put a halt to the use of that particular brand because they wanted to investigate further. And when they did investigate further, last month it came out in the investigation that it was not appropriate for use and definitely was not safe and effective. And it was withdrawn from the market completely worldwide. AstraZeneca was removed from the market worldwide because it was shown to have too many side effects and causing too many deaths and injuries. And yet, they actually stopped using it in March 2022. And even in Australia, they stopped ordering it, but the stuff they already had, which was millions of vials, they continued to use. They just stopped ordering it. Even though the EU had ceased it. Just about every nation in the EU, France, Germany, you name it. Greece, Italy. Misinformation. People in March 2021 were saying that it was happening. And they'll go, no, that's not real, that's not true. That's misinformation. The difference between misinformation and the real thing today seems to be only a couple of weeks. It literally, in a couple of weeks after they say, oh no, that's misinformation, it becomes truth. Follow the science, they said. Well, the science just said that we were right and we were wrong. They were wrong. That was misinformation, disinformation. And funny enough, the Australian government in that misinformation, disinformation bill has said it doesn't count for them. They can use misinformation or disinformation. Also, they can, the other people that are not bound by these legislations is mainstream media. Mainstream media can use misinformation or disinformation. Whistleblowers? No. Everyday Australians? No, you're not protected. Who decides what is misinformation and what is disinformation? A panel of 8 people decide what is misinformation and disinformation. Funny enough, they wanted to use those same powers the other day to make Elon Musk remove footage from the entire globe, not just Australia. So now they want to control what the whole world can see or hear or listen to, not just Australia. And the people of Australia, do you want to know what happened that day? Well, you can't. You're not allowed to. Because the misinformation, disinformation bill said that it had to be removed from Australia. There is actually 10 different lists of websites that you cannot visit in Australia. In the government The government have decided you can't go there. ASIO is one of the people that have decided. And now the misinformation, disinformation board of 8 people are increasing that.
What about the health treaty?
You can talk about that in a minute. Those 10 lists, one of them has over 20,000 websites on it. And interestingly enough, they have to actually put them on the list if they're going to ban them. But last year, they got in trouble for banning 2,500 websites without putting them on the list. The year before that, they got in trouble for banning 10,000 websites without putting them on the list. Interesting. Here's a task for you. If you don't believe it happens, jump on Google or Yahoo or DuckDuckGo or whatever you feel like is a search engine and look up Namdakadala Australialis. Guess what you'll get? Nothing. The website will not come up on a search. Why? Because these people in here have decided that you shouldn't see it. And what is that website about? Interesting enough, that website is about the people that they say they recognise. They say it's about the originals of this country. It's about elders, past, present, and in the future. And yet, the Australian government and Albanese have chosen to ban you from seeing it. That's right, you are not allowed to look at a website which the original people of Australia have put up. Namdakadala Australialis. Why? Because they're talking about the fact that they never ceded this country to the Australian government. They never ceded this country to the UK, to the King, the Queen. So you're not allowed to see that because they don't want you to know that these guys have no legal standing in this country. Misinformation? No, but we'll ban it anyway. Disinformation? No, but we'll ban it anyway. So, that's happening today. Misinformation, disinformation bill. And what else happened today? David McBride went to jail today. That's right, he walked in a free man and walked out. No, that's right, he didn't walk out. He went to jail. Why did he go to jail? Because he wanted to bring criminals to justice. And we can't have that. We can't have criminals going to justice in this country because most of them are now would end up in this jail. Misinformation and disinformation bill. Albanese, turn it down. The young people here standing up for the budget, they said they don't want a surplus. How can we have a surplus? We're in that much debt to other countries and we're giving away billions. Billions. And we're spending 17 million on housing people in Papua New Guinea who try to come to this country the incorrect way. And it works out at $1,700 per person per day to house them in Papua New Guinea. Are you bloody kidding me? I can get the Ritz in Sydney for cheaper than that. A day. And that particular site has been named several times by the Human Rights Commission as not being up to standard. At $1,700 a day, shouldn't want to be pretty good. Again, the Albanese government spending the money that they don't have on things we don't need.
It's interesting how the truth is always the greatest casualty of any war. And we've seen a lot of casualties in this war, starting from decent doctors and nurses and teachers and police officers and military people who didn't take something that was being forced on them because they weren't sure, not because they were bad people, not because they were rebellious people. Maybe because they were just intelligent people that didn't just take it for granted. To question has become a crime now. To stand up and speak the truth has become a crime. When it's a crime to report a crime, we're obviously being run by criminals. Just this week, we found out that the Victorian Police Force were found that they acted unlawfully and illegally when they assaulted, brutalised and injured peaceful protesters. Nick Patterson had to work hard for 3 years to get heard in court, and he was found not guilty of his crime, and the police were found guilty of theirs. Unnecessary, unreasonable force put on innocent, peaceful people. What's this country turned into? We've got police officers assaulting men, women and children for nothing more than just speaking their truth and standing up for their freedom. Freedom is something that we're born with. We're born free. And our governments keep making more and more laws that suddenly make decent, good people eventually break some law because they're making so many laws. They're bearing us down with unreasonable laws. They want us to be prisoners in our own country. We saw that in the lockdowns. Human rights, what are they? Human rights are for illegal, dangerous people that come onto our shores. And they get rights to get let loose. And if they don't want to wear an ankle bracelet, they don't have to, because their human rights are very important. However, mainstream media, I think your tax-free exemptions have run out now. I think it's time that you're speaking the truth, and we're seeing a bit more of that on mainstream. It's a relief. We need more. AstraZeneca, truth, bad. Victorian Police, truth, they're bad. Pfizer, when's that going to come out? Well, Zantac apparently causes stomach cancer, and Pfizer is now finding itself in big trouble for another medication. What about the WHO trying to pass the pandemic treaty? Many countries have pulled out. What are you going to do, Albanese? Are you going to sign us up to an unelected, corrupt organisation that has proven over the last 4 years how corrupt it is? What are you going to do? Send more money to countries that are using it to kill each other? What about our hospitals? What about our education system? Oh, that's right, we've got to send people over to participate in Eurovision because we're part of Europe, apparently. What about housing? What about our adult children who can't afford houses anymore? It's an impossible dream. My parents came to this country from Europe because they had a dream and it was realised. And they passed that dream on to us. But I can't pass that on to my children and grandchildren. But I'm not going away, Albanese, and all your corrupt leaders and governments and ministers and all the people that sit in that place with that big, big pyramid at the top. Yes, we get tourists coming through. People think it's grand. I've even spoken to people who said, don't tell me the government would do something like give us a jab that was not good for us. Well, I hate to disappoint you and to shatter your dreams, but that's exactly what they did. Greg Hunt said it himself on national television. You are part of a global experiment and trial. Once upon a time, you volunteered for trials. But what happened 4 years ago didn't ask for volunteers. It was mandated. And everyone said, but you've got a choice. That's your choice. Bad luck. You lose your job, you lose your house, you lose your family, you lose going to the hospital, you just miss out on human rights. It's your choice. Well, no. Choice implies freedom. Choice is when you choose apple pie or apricot pie. You pick what you want. But when the government says to you, oh, it's your choice to take the jab, or you don't get to have an income anymore and you may potentially lose everything, that's an ultimatum. Look it up. Dictionaries. Start using your brain, people. Don't just listen to what others say to you. Think for yourself. And don't rely on the mainstream media because they were paid by the government 3 years tax exemption to promote the narrative. And now they're going to try and push a bill that the only truth you will hear will be what people decide is the truth you're allowed to hear. And you know what? During the lockdowns, Dan Andrews got up on television and said, tell your neighbours if they don't follow the mandates and the rules and the imposition on your life. Dob them in. Ring us. It's the right thing to do, to tell us if your neighbours or your friends or your family are breaking my rules. And people did. People dobbed each other in. Family, friends. A bit like 1940s Germany, I think. But guess what? When David McBride decided he'd do what the government suggested, to dob people in for breaking laws, he dobbed the government in. He dobbed the military in. And guess what? He gets locked up. How does that work out? What's going on? Do you ever question what's going on? Do you ever put yourself in their position? How would you feel if one day they made a law that said you couldn't do something and you just had to do it and someone dobbed you in and you got locked up for it? Don't think we're far from that. Look at your history books. Talk to people that lived through communist countries, dictatorships. Start to see a pattern. Start to get scared. Be afraid. This is what's coming to our beautiful country.
You said it all.
You know, a lot of people in this country came to Parliament House a few years ago. How many years ago? 2 years ago. Lots of people came here from all over Australia. Some couldn't go back home because they closed off borders to their own people because of a particular vaccine status. And that was a huge crowd, and a lot of people stayed here for a long time, fighting for all of you.
They have blood on their hands. So, safe and effective. So we know that the AstraZeneca, after being withdrawn from sale, apparently, according to the company who manufactured it, it was for commercial financial reasons. But the fact is, nobody wanted to take AstraZeneca anymore because it had killed people. Therefore, you don't have much of a commercial product, do you, when it's known fact and you've had to admit in court that you actually harmed people. Now, I saw a guy up there before doing like a lunatic, putting his finger around his ears like we're crazy, when in fact, all we wanted was to be left alone. We just wanted to be left alone. We didn't want to have to be coerced to take something that we didn't believe in. It was a trial. Do you know what the difference between an experiment and a trial is? If it's under 100 people, it's an experiment. If it's over 100 people, it's a trial. I've never volunteered for a medical trial in my life, and I would never involve myself in a medical trial. I don't think I'm crazy for not wanting to participate in a medical trial. I certainly don't want my government to be coercing me to be involved in a medical trial. Can you understand that? Does that make sense? Does it make sense that I wouldn't want my government to coerce me into being involved in a medical trial when I've never wanted to be involved in a medical trial? Now I'm really angry because it's proven that the AstraZeneca, and let's face it, all we could take was AstraZeneca at the beginning of this fiasco, this disgraceful episode in Australian history that will go down as one of the most vile, murderous acts that a government has ever perpetrated against its people. I don't blame them for not wanting to talk about it. They're trying to hide from it because they're all criminally culpable. We have two governments, the Morrison government and now the Albanese government, who have been involved in this, at least complicit in it. The states were obviously much more enthusiastic. It's something that, when you look at the past, isn't surprising, because people ask me, why didn't you take it? Well, I knew instantly that you don't trust the government. The first time I heard that they were going to produce this product, I knew that governments were terrible at this sort of thing. I knew from my past about the contaminated blood scandal from the 80s, the AIDS crisis. There were a lot of people donating blood products for medical purposes, and they'd created a perverse incentive for people who had used injecting drug addicts to donate blood, and prisoners, and they were donating contaminated blood that had contaminated with hepatitis C, and also evidently whatever proved to be AIDS or caused people to have AIDS. This obviously affected people who took blood transfusion. Principally, we had a lot of haemophiliacs who received these blood products, and they had very bad health outcomes. This was back in the 80s. It's probably something that not everybody remembers, but we knew about it. So when they rolled this out, I knew that it was going to be a bad thing, that nothing good could come from it. I really didn't think it would be as bad as it's been. I'm astonished. In fact, I just can't believe, and I really didn't want to be this right. So we have just recently been vindicated as far as the AstraZeneca product being withdrawn from sale, because it's proven in law that it is not a safe product, and we know that it was not effective. Besides which, our own constitution protects us from medical conscription of any sort. Section 5123A of our beloved constitution that you all love. You love our constitution. Well, guess what? Most of you don't even give a damn what's written on it. You couldn't care less. And you know what? It'll come back to bite you in the ass. We are living under a belligerent occupation. Australia is a vassal state run by a group of gangsters. I could only name them, but call them gangsters, international gangsters who control this country through the banking system. And now we're at the stage where they don't like us and they want us gone. Wake up, everybody. Wake up. Your government is a fraud. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rob. Whoops, said his real name. He won't care. That was disinformation. So, we're having a misinformation, disinformation bill today. Take yourself back to March 2021, when people like Rob and myself were saying this doesn't seem right, this is not adding up, there's people getting sick from this medical procedure, there's even doctors coming forth saying it's not working, and we're told, no, you're wrong. Hide it. Well, if they had a misinformation, disinformation bill back then, you would have never heard about it. In fact, some of us probably would have gone to jail for even mentioning it. And yet, 2 years later, 827 days later, we're right. Oh my God, the misinformation wasn't misinformation. The disinformation wasn't disinformation, it was the truth. AstraZeneca, off the table. Why? It's killing people. Well, that's something like what we said. This seems to be killing people. Nurses coming out saying it seems to be killing people. I heard a nurse that had 18 years RAF medic and 13 years an ICU nurse tell me that it seems to be killing people. Now, if the government had the bill that they're bringing out now, back then, they would have said, oh, you can't talk about that, we're going to lock you up. And yet 2 years later, we're bloody right. How many of you know someone who's dropped dead lately? Out of the blue. Geez, that seemed weird. He was really healthy 3 years ago. He's had turbo cancer. Turbo brain tumours. Blood clots. Brain bleeds. Loss of limbs because of it. Oh no, that must be misinformation. Wrong.
Why don't they want to investigate excess deaths?
Why have they not updated the excess death numbers? Last updated 2 years ago. A year ago, sorry. And it was up 17.5%. Oh my God. Up 17.5% from the year before, which was up 12%. I really hope and I pray that the people that did take the medication are okay. And a lot of you will be. You will survive. But a lot of you will say, I haven't felt the same since. I've had more sick days. I feel like shit, I can't run anymore, I can't jog anymore. We had doctors having heart attacks when they go to ride their bike to work like they did every single day for years beforehand. We had sport players dropping dead on the field. It became that common that people changed the saying of drop dead like flies to drop dead like sportsmen. Because they were dropping dead on the sports field. Why was that? Myocarditis, pericarditis. Just happens to be one of the side effects. Comes out on the Pfizer document. I really hope that it's not as bad as it has been. I really hope for the people that did take it, especially AstraZeneca, which was found in court. They had to admit in court that it was causing deaths. And that's why it was removed from sale worldwide. 2 years after people like myself and nurses said it's not safe, it's causing problems. Even doctors, even scientists were saying it. Having their careers destroyed because of it. Losing their jobs because of it. And now it turns out to be true. And if the misinformation, disinformation bill that's going through today was back then, we'd probably be in jail. And more people would be dead. Because we probably woke a couple of people up to look into it some more and do their own research. And not trust the science. What science? I'll tell you what about science. It was known that the world was flat. Now it's known that the world is round. But the science back then said it was flat. The science today says it was round. So which science are you believing, the round or the flat? Which science do you follow? It was known that AstraZeneca was safe and effective, the science said. Now, it's known that AstraZeneca was not safe and effective. Which science are you following? The one of today or the one of yesterday? The misinformation, disinformation bill would tell you that you had to follow last year's one, because they would have told you at the time it was disinformation or misinformation. And today, the government's sitting in there, they're probably laughing. You know what? We're the ones laughing because we were right. Because it wasn't misinformation. What you were putting out was misinformation, but you will be exempt. You've made yourself exempt from a misinformation bill. How does that work? I thought, Albanese, that you said your government was going to have no hidden agendas, nothing hidden, is going to be clear and transparent. Well, then why do you need to write yourself out of the misinformation bill if you're clear and transparent, Mr. Albanese? That's because the government is lying to you constantly. Why? Because they wanted you to do what they say. Why do they want that? Well, I'm not getting into that. That's for you to research. I have my own thoughts on that. But if you do some research into the fact that mainstream media and the government will not be held accountable in this legislation of misinformation, disinformation, then you might get some clear view. And if you look at the woman who's supposed to be part of the chairing the 8 who tell you what misinformation, disinformation is, wants to control the world media by getting them to remove something off the Facebook or whatever it was, X or whatever it was, then you might get an idea. And a lot of the people that were coming forward and said it's safe and effective had no clue about what they were talking about. And they said, oh, we didn't have any medical advice at the time. Bullshit. The document that came out from Pfizer that listed 3 pages of side effects was available in March 2021. That's medical. That was the stuff that they tried to hide. They tried to get a bill. They tried to get a court order to say that they didn't have to bring it up for 70 years. Why would you want to not bring it up for 70 years? Why was the leaflet that came with it written on it intentionally left blank? What were they intentionally doing? Intentionally not telling you about all the side effects they already had information on. Why didn't they continue? Why did they continue to put that piece of paper there and said intentionally left blank once they released the side effects? Did you ever read it? Did you ever ask a doctor? Did you ever ask the doctor why it was left blank? I honestly feel sorry for a lot of the people who took AstraZeneca, which was the only one that was available to start off with, who never queried why the government was pushing for everybody to enter a medical experiment trial. I don't do any trials. If I don't know what's in something, I read the packet. If the packet doesn't say what's in it, then I won't eat it. Drink it. And definitely won't inject it straight into my muscles. I don't do drugs. I don't inject anything. I don't inhale anything. And I definitely wouldn't take the shit that they told me to take. I don't get sick. How many of you can say that? It's funny that back in the day, the judges the magistrates, and anybody that worked for the government was not mandated. Why? It's safe and effective. And when an Australian doctor and scientist tried to bring out a normal non-NRMA vaccine, they were shut down. They were shut down straight away. Why was that? Because the big pharma weren't going to make money from it. It was small-time Australian business. They sacked 350, APRA sacked 350 doctors for giving out exemptions. Who is APRA? APRA is not a government body. It might say .gov.au. It's not a government body. 95% of its funding comes from big pharma.
And a product without a data sheet, like a material data sheet.
How can that be a thing? How can someone who controls what the medical fraternities do and say is funded by big pharma and not the government? There's no doctors that work there even.
They're frauds.
All they're worried about is where their funding comes from. I had a senior sergeant say to me one day when one of the officers was paying up, I said, look at that. He's breaking the law. And he goes, how can you expect a policeman to make a moral choice when he has a mortgage and kids? I said, are you listening to yourself? A policeman can't make a moral choice because he has kids and a mortgage? There's something wrong in this country. If I knew an officer who made a moral choice and got punished for it, I would support him. Because he did the right thing. Like David McBride did the right thing. And what happened to him? He's going to jail today. Well, he's already there, actually. Because he did the right thing. The first thing they do in Duntruan when you go to train, which is the military training grounds, they say, if you believe the order you have received is not legal or right, you have the duty to stand up and say no. And yet they told David McBride his duty was to do as he was told. No, his duty was to stand for the Australian people and the Iranian people that were murdered. And he didn't even say that. He just said that they were investigating the wrong people and there was something wrong with what was going on. But that'll be disinformation tomorrow. And I could probably go to jail for disinformation. And then maybe in 2 years' time when it comes out it's the truth, I can get back out again.
This might be the last day we can do this.
You're probably not going to have to hear this again because it'll be disinformation tomorrow and I'll go to jail for it. Those guys over there standing in the corner, who most of them are fairly good guys, will have to arrest me for talking disinformation or misinformation.
But who decides what's the truth?
Well, there'll be 8 people to decide. Not 27 million people. 8 people will decide.
Because there's only one truth.
There's only one truth. There's only one view.
The New South Wales Police have the one truth, they're the one source of truth.
Yeah.
Single source of truth.
I can guarantee that most police officers that joined the force actually wanted to make a difference.
Sure have.
And they really, really have. I'm not going to bag most of them, unless they come from Victoria.
They got found guilty.
And here, one day, down here, there was 17 police officers came down here. And I was live streaming. One of them said to me, what are you doing? And I said, keeping you honest. You know what they did? They went straight for a 65-year-old woman and started questioning her. And why was that? They said they were doing an investigation into a hole in the lawn. Have you seen the rabbits around here? Oh my God. Holes in lawns, bloody hell. OH&S. Anyway, they do that because they know that the young guys that were here at the time would have stood up for that 65-year-old woman. And I told her to not answer the questions. And I asked her if she was here at that time, and she said no. I said, well, just tell him that, tell him to go away. And the officer said to me, oh, investigations don't work like that. I said, what are you talking about? She wasn't here. That's exactly how it works. End of story. 17 police officers against a 65-year-old woman. Seems legit to me. I've seen police officers crying because they had to abuse women and children for standing up for their rights. But that would have been misinformation they were standing up for. Because you have no rights. Ask the Misinformation, Disinformation Bill. You don't have the right to see something on X. You don't have the right to visit the website Namdakadal Australialis. You don't have the right to visit another 10,000 odd websites. Because it might offend somebody or something similar to that. Thank you for that, Mr. Government. Thank you for making up my mind what I want to believe and see. Next, you won't have the right to smoke. Next, you won't have the right to walk on the street. Next, you won't have the right to leave your town. Next, you won't have any rights. Because that'll be misinformation to say that you have rights. And the government can say that because they're exempt from the Misinformation Bill. Did you know that a police officer in legislation is allowed to lie to you? Yeah. And they do. Constantly. Over and over. There is good ones out there. There is officers who do the right thing. Stand in their truth, but they're still standing on the wrong side. It's a shame. Very much a shame.
Speaking of disinformation, Bill, what is disinformation? Disinformation is an opinion of a person who maybe doesn't have the right information on the right track, or not the full information. Information who could bring up concerns and bring up discussions. Disinformation. Nothing else than free speech and expressing your opinion. Disinformation, lies, what we experience the same as in Parliament, lies for ministers, prime ministers, and yet they're protected. If you have a disinformation bill, it protects the Parliament to lie to you, to dictate to you what you want to do. How can they make a disinformation bill? They're making legislations. But the rule book and guidelines for making rules is still the Constitution. And when you read through it, there's no authorization to make such bills. But then, if you look through the laws what they agreed to or established it beforehand, it's free speech. We still have free speech in Australia, recognized by the Parliament by law, and yet they want to create a new law to cancel their old law. Seems more and more like dictation. Dictatorship. Looking further into the law, we have laws that have to be passed and authorized before you proceed by the Attorney General. The Attorney General is an elected minister, and he gets a position as. Unfortunately, the power of justice and law in this country lies in the Attorney General, not in the judge. If the Attorney General can turn down a case or override a case, has nothing to do with justice. It's only implemented to protect the corruption on the agenda of the parliament. It's not for the people, for peace and justice. It is there to protect themselves. One of the most powerful laws that we have is 8.4. Freedom to demonstrate, if you interpret it. The right to demonstrate, to express your political opinion and stand up for your freedom. Interference with this, which we have here experienced a lot from government officials. 10 years of imprisonment. But when you follow this act, in the next act, this only can be implemented with a written authorization from the Attorney General. So, if ministers, such as the Minister of Police, gives the order to disassemble a protest because the narrative doesn't go with their narrative, he's protected. Even if the protesters doing the right thing, he's protected because the Attorney General has the right not to proceed with these procedures. So we have rights, but we don't have any. What we have is our dictators in this country.
Does anybody wonder, probably don't, what happens to our water in this country? Megalitres, trigger litres, rivers drying up after centuries of flowing, animals dying of thirst, fish dying. Where's the water going? Well, at the start of the Murray-Darling, there was 2 farms either side of the Murray-Darling who have massive, massive, massive water reservoirs. And they own something which is against the Constitution. Water rights. Because it says in our Constitution that you cannot sell the water, cannot charge for it. You can even walk into places like McDonald's and ask for a glass or a cup of water, and they can't refuse you because it's in your Constitution. But most of you don't know the Constitution. Now these 2 farms are damming up the water on either side. They pump it into massive megalitre dams. Sorry?
Cubby Station,
Jenny Reinhardt's Cubby Station is one of them. The other side's owned by the Chinese.
4 times bigger than Sydney Harbour.
The dam is 4 times bigger than Sydney Harbour. Now, do you think the Murray-Darling would flow a bit better if it was released? I think so.
They're growing crops not suited to Australia's conditions. And Jenny Reinhardt's got 200 square kilometres of it.
They're
Growing crops not suited. There's
The-
rice and almonds, you know, which aren't suited to this country. No.
Up in the top end of Australia, there is also a fair bit of fresh water around Alligator River, etc. And they actually ship that to China by the megalitre. Because one of the farmers in the Murray-Darling he was a water expert, and he did a bit of a study and worked out there was megalitres of extra water going out to the ocean. And he proposed that they do something similar to the Snowy River scheme, to pipe it through to the Murray-Darling to help save the Murray-Darling, which could have been done simply by just releasing the dams, Junior Reinhardt's dams. And the government went, "Ooh, really? Excess water? Oh, well, we'll sell the rights of that to China." And now there's a ship that pulls in to a wharf who loads up with water and takes it off to China. And you can look for this. It used to be available on the web. I don't know if it still is. It might be misinformation now or disinformation. So Julia Reinhardt's crops that she grows at the top of the Murray-Darling, 200 square kilometres of them, are stuff that shouldn't be growing out there. And that's her excuse for taking all the water, because she needs it for those crops. But the Constitution says that the government has no rights to sell the rights to water. And yet they do. And people like Julia Reinhardt and Barnaby Joyce, Gina Reinhardt, sorry. The rights to that water is not for sale, according to the Constitution. And yet, $80 million went into the pocket for it. Barnaby Joyce's pocket. Thank you, Mr. Barnaby. Thousands of fish, millions of fish die. Millions of kangaroos die. Millions of animals die. Farms are destroyed. Farmers commit suicide. All because they are doing something against the Constitution. Why? Money. And tomorrow that'll be misinformation or disinformation, and these guys in blue over here have to come and arrest me for saying it. That's interesting. What else are they going to say is misinformation, disinformation? No. One of the guys said, hopefully it's only stuff online. It's not. The legislation is full stop. Even though the Criminal Code Act 1995, Section 84.3, number 1, says you have the right to peacefully politically protest. And anybody who tries to inhibit that right, either by threatening, arresting, or anything of the above, tries to stop you, minimum 2-year sentence. 2 years for stopping someone from peacefully politically protesting. Criminal Code Act 1995, 84.3, Section 1. Look it up. Know your rights. Know what you have the right to say and do. And no misinformation bill will stop your right to be free, or your right to consume water that's not charged for.
So yet another protest today. There's only like 10 of us here, and every time we protest, the police are always here. Normally we have a car out the front. And it always amazes me, because what threat are we? All we are doing is talking. What threat is that? But it is a threat because we are speaking the truth. We are informing people what's really going on because we've looked into it. But it amazes me that the police aren't in there arresting criminals. I know of a security guard that resigned in Parliament House because he couldn't take children into offices anymore. Couldn't do it. What the hell was going on there? But people do know, security, police do know that children are being trafficked all over Australia and even in this building. Did you know that, people? Yet we are a threat because why? We spread so-called misinformation, or maybe it's not. Maybe we know stuff and maybe we are exposing the truth. It's a crime when the police watch us. 10 people at the moment today, but other days there's been more, and they're focused on us. Why? Because they take orders. We are a threat. I don't touch children, I'm not a threat. We care about children. We're not a threat. But yet we are, because we tell the truth and we expose what's really going on. And they try to shut us down by saying we're spreading misinformation. Misinformation. But we're not, because we know people, we know what's really going on. And that's why we are a threat. How ridiculous is that? You need to look into it, Australia. Children are being trafficked and molested, raped and tortured in this country and all countries all over the world. But in this country it concerns us. And we get told that we're spreading misinformation. Well, that's an easy way to disregard what we're really saying. If it was your child, your grandchild, you would look into it. But you need to look into it before it is someone's child that you know. We know of so many people personally who've been affected by this, and that's why we stand up, and that's why we won't back down. Because this needs to be dealt with. This is the most important thing. Doesn't matter about life, your houses, your cars, your jobs, your profession. When children are being targeted all around this country, and they expose a few, like William Tyrrell and Daniel Morecambe, just to make it look like they're looking into it, but there's so many, so much more. It's on epidemic proportions and scales, and you don't know about it. They try to make it look like they're open and transparent, but it happens here in Canberra right under our noses. And I know people that know that. And we know people that have looked into it or been involved or been affected by this. And a lot of people do know, but they think it's very rare, but it's not. This is the most important thing, more than anything, because children can't protect themselves. So look into it.
I don't know what was the hardest thing to accept. A government that's trying to use you as a guinea pig, or the people that you consider fellow citizens that think it's okay and laugh at people or disregard people that have been injured by particular substances that have been forced on them. I'm shocked. I thought Australia was full of wonderful, caring people that love their neighbours and would help anybody, and there are a lot of them. But I've also been terribly shocked by the number of people that have just gone, oh, well, I'm fine, who cares, really, like, seriously. And you start to think to yourself, you talk a lot about what's happening on other soils, other countries. You talk a lot about history and what terrible things were done to certain groups of people, but you don't seem to give a stuff about what's happening to your own people. We've had children die. I personally have lost friends. I've personally had friends that are injured, and just about every other day I read about or hear about or get a phone call about someone who's either died or who has to sell their business because they can't work anymore. And people look and laugh or smile as we speak, and yet they don't even realise how thin the ice is that they're skating on. They think they've got freedom because now people can travel, and it seems like a lot of people only live for travelling to other countries. And that's their freedom. They can do it now. They got jabbed so they could travel, but they still couldn't travel for a few years. But now they're all open borders and people are travelling. But they've all forgotten about the very thing that they probably virtue signal about. The Nuremberg Code. Oh yes, we know how important that is. The Nuremberg Code. You all know what it is, but you don't really know what it entails and what, because if you did, you wouldn't have let them impose vaccines on you. You took it and you still got sick. How many of you took it and you still got it? How many of you didn't really want it, but you took it because you wanted to travel? Sadly, for a lot of people, some who I know personally, they took it so they could make a living. Now they're in a wheelchair, classified as a Pfizer injury. But you know what? They're not eligible for compensation, let alone recognition. Because if they start admitting to one or two, there'll be a flood of applications, and then the truth will come out. This whole thing was a Trojan horse for your health, for your community, for the future. Back on track, flatten the curve. Let's get back onto what we were doing before: travel, spending, eating out, whatever. Did it happen? Nope. Lockdown after lockdown, imposing masks. First it was one hit, then it was the second hit. Then we find out that there are some people up to 5, 6, 7 goes at it, and they're still getting sick, if not getting sicker. But you know what? None of you really question why our government isn't interested in finding out why it's happening. I mean, thalidomide took 5 years before they started to investigate, and how many children were born defected with no arms, no legs? And you know what? There are still some people today who are fighting for compensation from all those years ago. But that's okay. Didn't affect you, so why should you care about anybody else? Yeah, well, I'll just keep going till they pass the bill. You know, I've sat with people and they've asked me questions, and many of my friends that have been hit with it have started speaking to me and admitting they regret it. How many of you regret taking it? They regret it. Strokes. I've got friends younger than me that are now disabled with a stroke. And you know what? The only people that care are the ones that were fighting for them. Because at the forest of the fallen, and I hope all of you take note of this, there is a thing called the forest of the fallen. And that was started because people were being injured or killed and being ignored. Like a little dirty secret, you lock it away so no one knows about it. But now we have the Forest of the Fallen that comes from Jab Injuries Australia. Look it up, people. It's not a political agenda. It's not a left or right agenda. It's just a truth agenda where people write their own narrative, their own story about their injuries. I bet every single one of you out there have lost at least one person you know or love, or have seen someone you know or love injured. Not suddenly, but particularly in the last couple of years. What's happened in the last couple of years that could possibly be behind this sudden increase of injuries and death? Now on the news, they're starting to talk about these sudden deaths of young athletes. Now, the people who are in their prime health, who are disciplined in what they eat, in their exercise, in their lifestyle, get out one morning, get up out of bed, feel great. They must feel great because they go to the football to play or to train, and they must feel great to be running around the oval and training, and suddenly they fall and die of a heart attack. Now, that's completely normal, I'm being told. Apparently, there's nothing unusual about what's going on. However, if the government had nothing to cover up, if the government was sure that it was safe and effective, why aren't they prepared to do an investigation into all the sudden deaths and injuries? To push this thing out all over the world, and I come from Italy, and I've seen a lot of Italians that died, particularly after the release of it. These people trusted and did what they were told, or they couldn't live a normal life or could lose everything. And now they regret it. There's a lot of regret out there. So if people think we're stupid or we're ridiculous or we're exaggerating, you know, I could be doing a lot more today than standing here outside this place talking to you. But we actually care about you. We care about the future of this world and its people. Maybe you guys should start caring a little bit more as well and start questioning what's really going on here. And open your heart up to those that have been injured or to those who have died by being obedient to this corrupt government.
Oh, no, you go.
No, I'm sort of not ready still.
Oh.
Yeah, no, I was ready earlier on, no.
Check. So, we're the second protest to be here today. And there's a third one coming after us. I just found out. Yep. There's another 200 people coming. So, it sort of gives you an idea of how good the government's going at the moment, doesn't it? When in one Tuesday, e.g. the middle of the week, there was 3 protests about 3 different things the government is bringing up at the moment. Interestingly enough, tomorrow that'll probably be misinformation. I'll have to go to jail for bringing it up. Or disinformation because I haven't got all the answers. It is beyond a joke how bad this government has become. It is beyond a joke how bad this government is disconnected from the people. It is beyond a joke how this government has continued to ignore the people. It is beyond a joke how this government has not stepped in and stopped a man who brought criminals to the attention of the authorities going to jail. That is when you know that the criminals are actually behind those doors up there. When they don't stop an honest, truthful man going to jail. When they start to try and bring in legislation which will stop people from speaking the truth. And these people will go to jail. Well, they're already trying. And when a billionaire from another country who has a platform for people to speak freely on gets told the Australian government's going to prosecute him, he laughs in their face and says, that's fine, I'm taking you to court, international court. Not the other way around. The Australian government didn't take him to court, he took them to court. over it. That just makes me laugh. So this group of younger people that's standing out the front over here will have no rights very shortly. They're continually being eroded away, non-stop. And none of them will be free like we were free back when we were younger to do things, anything that wasn't hurting other people. Yeah, like riding around in the back of a station wagon. Interesting enough, I used to do a lot of water skiing when I was younger, and I was pretty good at it. And then about 10 years ago, I decided that I'd go for a quick water ski behind the old man's new boat. We got pulled over by the water police, and he said, "Where's your life jacket?" And I went, "I'm skiing." He went, "Yeah, you got to wear a life jacket when you're skiing, it's the law." Well, I said to him, "Isn't it my right to go water skiing without a life jacket on? Because if anybody's gone water skiing, you need a little bit of movement." But no, he said, "No, we're going to have to fine you for water skiing without a life jacket on." I said, "Oh, mate, I water skied all my life without a life jacket on." "Oh, but what if you fall off and bump your head and drown?" I went, "Well, that'd be on me. That'd be my right to water ski without a life jacket on, and if I drown, it'd be go, oh, well, maybe you should have wore a life jacket. But it's still my life." Oh, no, that'd be misinformation. It's not my life, it's their life to rule and control. Well, not while I'm alive. And I'll do it for my niece, my nephew, my two sons, my two nephews. I'm standing for them. I'm standing for their rights. And you can stick that misinformation bill right up the chimney.
He debunked it like that. Come on, speak. Go.
I've got to keep it rolling, don't we?
Yep, got to keep it rolling. Next.
Susan Templeman!
Oh, Batman.
I know you're not listening. I know Parliament's in session at the moment. But there's security listening, and they'll take notes. Maybe they'll pass some messages on. Yeah, so that was an interesting meeting, Susan, at my local grocery shop. The one you were there for about an hour. It was very interesting that the reason for 100,000 migrants a month, the number one reason I got was we need more hairdressers in Australia.
Did you speak to your local member?
I did. She actually came out of the woodwork.
Yeah. What's the name?
Susan Templeman.
She's in there today.
She's in there. She's about to vote yes for the disinformation bill. Even though I bet Susan, I would bet anyone, Australia-wide, that you got more letters, or probably only letters against the disinformation bill, and no letters for it. Hey Susan, would that be right? No one supporting the disinformation bill except the Labor Party, and the Teals, and the Greens. And the Liberals will pretend to be against it, but they know you have the numbers. So if everyone that you represent is writing in saying we don't want the disinformation bill, and you vote yes for it, then maybe it's time for you to leave, Susan, and all the rest of the Labor Party, because you're not representing the people of Australia like you're supposed to. And you seem to only get away with it because you get propaganda in the mail, which I'm calling platitudes. Platitudes. Oh, we did this for you. We got some money for the fire brigade. We're giving you $1,000 if your house burns down. Emergency money. How about Susan? People can afford to save $1,000 for emergencies. How about that? That's like $20 a week for a year. But at the moment, most Australians can't even do that. How about that, Susan? Your house burns down, the government gives you $1,000 and you're meant to be happy about that? And you're proud of that? And what's the other big thing you're proud of? They are giving more paternity leave, another extra month or two. How about a man can afford to support his wife and family on a single wage? Susan, how about that? So you give your mothers an extra month or two to hang out their baby, and then they're back to work, slaving away for the rest of their life, and give their children away to the daycare and the school system. No deal, Susan. We don't.
Yeah, no deal.
Sounds very nice and sweet the way you say it.
We're not down with it.
I know you're into advertising, your pastor's in advertising, which is basically just telling lies, making people think they want stuff they don't need. But even that you're not very good at, because your leaflet's a bit lower class in my opinion.
Do any of you guys know what the next protest coming up is? Because we don't know here. Do you guys in the chats know?
What about the fact that
If you do, let us know.
the parents get told by the preschool teacher that the kids spoke for the first time today?
Robbie, do you know?
Yeah, of course. Parents aren't there.
Will I just share something quickly?
That would mean that those parents who drop their kids off at the daycare centre at, I think it's 8 weeks now is the maximum. 8 weeks, yeah. They get told by a preschool teacher or a daycare centre teacher, oh, your kid walked for the first time today. Imagine that as a parent being told by somebody else that your kid walked for the first time. And then a little bit later on, oh, your kid spoke for the first time today. The parents coming to pick their kid up from preschool or from daycare, your kid walked for the first time today. Your kid spoke for the first time today. That'd be misinformation. That would never happen. It happens constantly today because they tell you that you must go to work. You must give them money. They need your money. They want to break the family unit up. They don't want people raising their own children with morals and standards. And Rita will tell you why.
Breaking news, ladies and gentlemen. The Albanese Labor government has just handed Aussies a, get this, $288 million bill to fund the rollout of their new digital ID system. Did we want it?
No.
Did we get it?
Yes.
Is that a pattern?
Yes.
Of course it is. The Albanese government is pushing everything he and his party want, not what we, the people, want. They work for us. And you know, just quickly, and I'll be done for the day, I'll give you a bit of peace. Quickly, I'll tell you, when I come into Canberra and I see all these cameras and all these surveillance carts around the place, you know, I think they should stop spying on us, the civilians and the residents of Canberra and other states and territories. I think we should have cameras on Parliament. I think we should be monitoring and surveilling them, considering what's been said about them
Thank you.
and the way that they've acted as a belligerent government, passing bills that people haven't asked for. Let's check them out instead of them keeping an eye on us. We're just decent people. But they want to fine us for everything, taking every freedom away, while they commit all sorts of things in that house up on the hill.
See, some people think protesting doesn't work. We come out here and nothing happens, but I remember watching Victoria very closely. And I don't remember all the details. There's just one I do remember clearly. Was the guy or the barber shop that opened up because people wanted a haircut. And he opened up in the face of fines. He got fined $10,000. But the thing is, I think that was on a Saturday. It was on the weekend. Then on that Monday when Parliament opened, guess what happened? Dan Andrews announced you're allowed to go get a haircut. And it happened, things like that happen a few times. The government does step back, but it's still to maintain their illusion. Because people stand up and show the government, no, we're going to do what we're going to do. We're not listening to you anymore. And then the way the government reacts to that is they actually take a step back to maintain the illusion of control. So if you're at the breaking point that you need a haircut and people are going to rebel, we're going to allow you to have a haircut. So just remember to keep up the good work and keep up the good fight. This government is under attack from many, many different angles at the moment. All the people that know that the people in this house are corrupt and not working for the people of Australia are all taking action to bite back at this government.
Their freedom's conditional. There's no real freedom even though people think there is.
I've got a whole lot of things, like paperwork I've got to do at the moment, all these like side worries that involve the government departments. And then I realised the other day, it's all involving money. All my interactions with the government besides this, coming out here having a bit of a whinge, is all the government wants money off me. From here, from there, from this tax, from the superannuation, from fines. And then I've got to deal with it because I know I'm not guilty and not wrong. And then on my superannuation, I have to like sell some gold because I couldn't have all my money in gold. And guess what? Gold's gone up and that money's gone nowhere. So following your stupid regulations has actually lost me money. Or not lost it, just not gained as much. So these stupid rules and regulations, all this micromanagement, I've had enough. So the common law people are attacking this government if we're not following common law. Constitutional people are attacking for not following the Constitution. Although you pretend you follow the Constitution. That thing years ago when you were sacking ministers because they had dual nationality. They didn't have dual nationality. You were doing the wrong thing because we're all swear an oath to the Crown, which is all the Crown countries like Canada and UK, Australia, New Zealand. Geez, what are there's heaps more that I don't even remember. Yeah, South Africa was. So if you had a British passport, an Australian passport, you're still serving the Crown. That's not counted as dual nationality in the Constitution. So the only time you enforce the Constitution, you got it wrong.
What about Alex Vella? Eh? Oh, the boss of the rebels. fucking home, if it goes down every 12 months to older, anyway, he's done. He's fucking loser. He's Australian everywhere, shit.
Thank you, Albanese, you fucking piece of shit.
She's married an Aboriginal lady, ever. And they fucking, she's up at,
Piece of shit. Everyone's
on her own
coming
with
into
kids.
business and
So I'm saying,
welfare
and he hasn't been charged with his wife of anything.
We hate you, Albo.
Hey? Yeah, but like, you don't families like that. What about killing all the birds, all the animals, all the way up in Victoria to Melbourne?
Yeah, great job on protecting the bees, by the way. It's funny because I did cross the, which I was going, where was I? Crossing Victoria to South Australian border, I believe. And I said to the border security, oh, you're going to be letting these infected bees across next couple of months, aren't you? Because it's almond season, they're going to need the bees. He goes, oh, no. Government wouldn't let that happen. It's all sorted out. And all the beekeepers that knew what they were talking about, you ignored, probably because you had a contract with someone who sells poisons, most likely. And because you want to get rid of the little farmers, so go and take out all their beehives. And all the people that knew what they were doing and knew how to manage it, you ignored. So that's how much worthy the government is.
They actually destroyed all the crops.
Yeah.
Cattle dying in there for 2 weeks.
Anybody
It just destroyed everyone, mate.
And how about selling off Australia to places like China, selling them Murray River water, so they can build their own dam and water their cotton fields. Well, I don't know enough about that stuff. There's so much wrong that the government does, can't keep up with it all.
So much. Go, Maddie.
Let's go back. So today the misinformation, disinformation bill is up for vote. It's a part of Agenda 2030. So as members of the World Economic Forum in there, I'm assuming you're all going to vote for it. Let's go back to the 50s. Back in the 50s, we were drilling the Great Barrier Reef for petroleum. That was misinformation and disinformation spread through propaganda in our newspapers back then. It wasn't happening until the 60s, when they did a Royal Commission into it. Whilst doing the Royal Commission, they still drilled the Great Barrier Reef for petroleum. Moving forward, at the end of the 60s, they supposedly stopped. And then in the 70s and 80s, this magical thing happened. Global warming destroyed the Great Barrier Reef. And it went back to disinformation, misinformation, that it was drilled for petroleum in the first place. Then the 90s came along, and we were told that coral bleaching happened on the Great Barrier Reef from divers. Again, it was still misinformation and disinformation that the Great Barrier Reef was ever drilled for petroleum. Now, apparently climate change created that bleaching. And it was still disinformation and misinformation that we drilled the Great Barrier Reef for petroleum. A funny thing happened 2 years ago when they announced global boiling.
35 years after the first report on the Great Barrier Reef, they had the best coral that they have in 35 years. Is that because we stopped drilling it for petroleum? Is that because we stopped diving there? Was global warming and climate change and global boiling all over with? Stop lying to the Australian people. Start telling the truth. Your misinformation, disinformation bill gives you power to cover up more things, and Australians are fed up with the lies.
We're waking up.
It's no wonder the myth of the bleaching of the Great Barrier Reef is continuing on, because I think if the Geese government's given about $1 billion to save the reef. So it's a lot of money to buy off a lot of people to continue the propaganda. $1 billion given to scientists that have to pretend the reef is dying. And it's been, whether it's oil or it's just a natural occurrence. But there are scientists that have been studying the reef for a long time that have seen the bleaching, the reef comes back, it bleaches, it comes back. But now you've got $1 billion paid to scientists that only get funding if they say the reef is dying. Well, then guess what? Results we're going to get.
Not really that passionate about it.
Lots of
Fair enough.
Pinocchios in there.
But I'll get on something else.
So, still on climate change, because the climate always changes. But our government has admitted that they cloud seed to create more rain and they weather manipulate. Yet, when they do this, at the same time they're talking about climate change, stop manipulating our weather. Stop the weather manipulation and let this planet do what it's always done.
Old saying, don't interfere with nature.
Oh, there we go.
One more thing.
Yep.
All right.
So back on the misinformation, disinformation. When I grew up in the 80s, 90s, back in the 80s, it was misinformation and disinformation. It was a flat out lie that there was a pedophile ring happening within the Catholic Church. That lie and that cover up by our government has been exposed in the last 5 years with the Royal Commission into institutional child sex abuse.
What do they do with that information?
Why is our government allowed to control what is truth? They could have protected so many children.
They're pedophiles.
Back in 1995 to 1997, there was a Royal Commission into police corruption, integrity. Catalogued with that was the Wood Royal Commission. A police document appeared from that. The then Bill Heffernan requested to the Parliament that 28 names of alleged pedophiles sitting within our government, our judicial system, top of our police, and even a Prime Minister on the list of alleged Prime Ministers, he requested those names to be released to the public. It has been 30 years, and the time is now to have that document released so the Australian people who know who their orders are coming from. Hashtag Exposure 28.
I think part of that Royal Commission, they brought out what they call the National Redress Scheme. Who's heard of the National Redress Scheme? That's not many people. That must be misinformation. No, it's not. The National Redress Scheme, which was the government's answer to a Royal Commission into child sexual abuse in institutions. The answer was pay them money and put them on a list. So what happens is someone rings up the redress scheme and says, my child has been abused or I have been abused in this institution. The person on the other end of the phone will take down all the information, including names and the account and the people involved. And then someone will look into it and go, yep, that person is at that location. Yes, that person that was abused went to that location at the time that the person who was supposedly offended was at that location. It could have happened. So we'll give the person who was offended against, abused against, a pocket full of money. We'll send a note to the institution saying that your institution has been named to have child abuse in, generally to the management, who usually know who they're talking about or are the person they're talking about. And then they go on a list to say that someone has been offended against there, and that's the end of it. No investigation, no imprisonment.
The institution has to write a letter and say they're sorry.
Oh yeah, and the institution has to write a letter to the abused child or child's family and say, geez, we're sorry. We're sorry that we let that happen to your child, or I did that to your child. And then it all goes away.
And I've read through that legislation for the redress scheme, and it turns out the government actually pays. If the institution doesn't have the money, the government pays that compensation.
Who pays?
The government pays.
Who pays?
The government pays for child sexual abuse.
Who pays?
The government pays for pedophilia.
Us, we pay.
It's which is the taxpayers. So you and I are funding the government-funded pedophilia. Because nothing happens to the perpetrator. Nothing happens to the perpetrator. They get to continue on with their lives. They don't have to pay any compensation themselves because the institution does if it has the money. And if the institution doesn't have the money, then you pay. You owe. Does that sound right?
Misinformation.
And the thing is, it is technically that's justice, because if you accept that compensation payout, then you've accepted that that's all you need to that's what you need to have justice done. However, none of these people, as well, there is no public list of pedophiles. So you pay for this pedophile, we're paying for a pedophile protection. It's a pedophile protection racket run by this corporate government on the hill there.
So if you were paid out as a parent by the National Redress Scheme, which meant that you accepted that was an appropriate form of punishment, you are technically prostituting your child. Because you're saying that money was a good enough reason to not pursue the fact that your child was abused. You don't need that person to go to jail. You don't need that person investigated. All you needed was money. And that sounds like prostitution to me. So as a parent, prostituting your child is probably not necessarily a good idea. And if it was put to you that way, you probably wouldn't accept it. But when they put it to you, they, oh, no, this is the National Redress Scheme, this is how we do it. It's hush money. And in my eyes, it's prostitution money. So, digital ID won't affect anybody? Nah, it's all right. 288 million won't affect anybody? Nah, it's all right. Really? So,
The misinformation and digital ID bills work together.
so when the misinformation digital ID bill will work together, but one day you're going to go in and order a hamburger, and when you go to pay for it, it'll go, and you go, what? And they'll say, no, you've had red meat this week. You can't have it again. And you go, but I want the red meat. No, the government says you can't have red meat twice in 1 week. It's crickets today, with cricket flour in your bread, and you think, that sounds like crap. Well, it's already in there. Look into it. Do your own research. And then you go, and you think, you know what? I want to take my vintage motorcycle for a drive. So you go and ride it down the street to the petrol station, and you go to pay for the petrol. And you go, I want to go for a ride. They go, no, your motorbike's too old. It doesn't pass the emissions laws. You can't put petrol in that motorbike because it's breaking their law because it's not environmentally friendly. This doesn't sound good. So then you think, right, you ring up Domino's and go, I want a pizza. You quote your credit card over, think, but I want a pizza. No, you went to the doctors the other day and we found that your what do they call it? The fat in your blood is too high. The cholesterol is too high. So fatty foods are off the diet for you. But I want a pizza. No, your doctor said that your cholesterol is too high, so you can't have a pizza. What? But I didn't even tell the doctor to tell anybody. But your digital ID told them that your cholesterol was high. Your credit card told them that you were buying a pizza. And the government has decided that you shouldn't have pizzas because your cholesterol is too high. And then you go down to Woolworths and you're scanning all your items and you're scanning your bacon and it won't scan. What's wrong with my bacon? Why won't my bacon scan? You call the representative over and she goes, oh no sir, you can't have bacon because your cholesterol's too high. And you go, well, what about my eggs? She goes, I don't know, try to scan your eggs. No, it won't scan either. Why is that? Because your digital ID said that when you went to the doctors, your cholesterol was too high. So you can't have bacon or eggs. And you can't have that mince because that's not the lean mince. You have to go back and get the lean mince, sir, because your cholesterol's too high. And you people think that I'm crazy saying this. It's only a step away. It's literally that easy for them. It's all going to be tied together. And you'll go for a drive down the street. And you'll go to drive out of the city limits. And then there'll be a beep, 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 beep in your car. And you'll go, what's going on? They'll go, your carbon footprint for this week is too high. You can't go any further. You have to go home and stay home. You go, what do you mean my carbon footprint's too high? Well, most people don't know already that any car with Bluetooth is scanned at most traffic lights in most cities. If you don't believe me, there is even an app, or ask your insurance company if you can get the app which allows them to govern your insurance bill by how much travel in certain areas you have. And then ask them how it works, and they will tell you, oh, just register your Bluetooth on your car with us and the app, and it will tell us because every traffic light has a Bluetooth scanner in it. And you don't believe me? That is available today. That is available today. That's not misinformation, that's fact. That is fact. In fact, I can actually tell you what the name of that app is. Let me have a quick little look. The name of that app is, here we go, Virtual Watchman. Virtual Watchman, look it up. Virtual Watchman allows you to register the Bluetooth address of your car with the app, which then is connected to all the traffic lights which have Bluetooth scanners, because Bluetooth is always on in your car, and you can get your insurance paid by where you go or how often you drive. Does that sound scary? Well, that's just touching the iceberg. That's right. Won't be long. No bacon and eggs. No normal mince, just lean mince. No pizza. No hamburger. That's a cool Corolla, bro.
Live tomorrow on this channel, and if you want to stay up to date, tonight, Canberra Protest 2022 on Paul's channel. Have a good one.